Today I'm joined by Jeroen Otter. Jeroen has been nominated by René Wolf in a previous interview. Jeroen is short track coach for the Dutch national team since 2010. And since 2010 the Dutch national team has seen a growth in results. One medal at the 2014 Olympic Games and 7th in the medal table, to 4 medals at the 2018 Olympic Games and 2nd in the medal table. Recently very successful World Championships in 2019, so congratulations. And Jeroen has been national coach in the USA and Canada before he came to the Netherlands in 2010. So, welcome Jeroen.
Thank you.
Jeroen, in your life as a coach or athlete, what was your darkest moment?
Well, as coach and as an athlete you have many darkest moments, but probably for me as an athlete the most dark moment was that we were in a team in those years, in the mid-80s. We were a very competitive team in our sport. The Dutch were one of the top 3 countries in the world for 5 years in a row. I'm talking 86, 87, 88, 89 and 90. Every year the Dutch team won the World Championships and the Olympic demonstration exhibition sport in 88. And we became a full sport in 92, and the selection competition for that moment was the World Championships in Australia in 91, like exactly 11 months prior to the games. And by far I never lost a competition. I never in my 5 years we never lost the most important competition of the year, the World Championships or the Olympic Games. And we got penalized. We got a disqualification, and we were not allowed to go to the games. Like that. Yeah. We made one mistake, and our Olympic dream was over. And after '88, I studied economics at the University of Amsterdam, and I had in my mind '88. It was the end of my career, and I would finish my studies. And we won that Olympic Games, and we didn't feel completely fulfilled. Due to the fact, I think, that it was a demonstration sport, and we didn't really feel the support of the KNSB in those years. Our national government body, the Olympic Committee, the Dutch Olympic Committee really didn't give any support, and the whole team was like, okay guys, screw it. Whoever had the plan to quit after '88, let's continue till '92. And then suddenly 10 months prior to the games, or 11 months prior to those games, we ended up getting a disqualification, and our dream was over. We didn't go. That was a real dark moment. Yeah. A real dark moment.
I believe that. I've written down actually later as a question, because you guys were world champion 4 years in a row. So 90, 89, 87, 86, right? So 86 to 90.
Yeah, correct.
And
88 we were second, but there was a week prior or 2 weeks prior to the Olympic Games, and we won the Olympic Games. Right.
Okay. And how did you recover from that moment?
In '91, well, that was really tough. Especially, I know a few of the guys, but especially for me, I finished my studies just because I wanted to go to those games, and I couldn't combine studying at the University of Amsterdam. And in those years, there were no facilities. You just had to do your exams at the moment it was planned, and top sport and study. At least not for me. I wasn't probably smart enough or agile enough in that combination of the two to finish the study. So I quit, and I picked up another study that was much easier to do, and I finished that in a few years, and it was not a problem. But I really changed my future due to the fact that we won in '88 at the games, and I think if we would have been 3rd or 4th or 5th, I would have said, okay, nice, continue my life with something else. But in this case, I kept skating, learned from that dark moment in Sydney, Australia. 35 degrees outside and racing in an in a shopping mall in a small ice rink, and I continued for another year, and then I moved to the U.S. actually for, well, I didn't know at that time, but for these 6 years coming up until '98.
I guess there's another dark moment I want to touch on. So before I let you off the hook here, early this year, one of your athletes has had a serious accident, right? And that was prior to the European Games.
Correct.
So I imagine, I mean, you go to the European Games to support your athletes and prepare them, but on the other side, one of your athletes is in danger, right? It was life-threatening at the beginning. How do you deal with that?
Whew. Now, the one that I just touched was the darkest moment as an athlete. Mm-hmm. And now you're talking about darkest moment as coaches or as a coach. And this year, this season, the post-Olympic season, we had our biggest aim, written in capitals in our program, was the European Championships in our own home country. Dordrecht, always a full house, great support from anybody that loves the sport of short track, and even outside of that. And then a month prior, our top athlete, Shinky Knecht, who was one of course, the title candidates, got an injury with a truck, and he damaged his calf muscle. That was already a big impact on our team. You know, you're missing your main guy, and then a day before the start of the European Championships, we got the news that he burned himself by lighting a stove, and it went completely out of hand. And he burned almost half of the front of his body, like it was over a quarter of his total body was burned. Well, that's a big part and a major injury, and especially the impact on the team. Hearing that news probably 20 hours prior to the start of the European Championships, knowing that he would not have been there as an athlete, but he would have been there as a support guy. You know, he would have showed up on that Friday and helping the team and helping myself and the staff members with his view on the competition. And suddenly you got, in the back of your mind, you got a guy, in your mind, you got a guy that is fighting for his life. And the moment we heard the news, we had no clue how bad it was, and you know, we knew it was very bad, but how very bad, you know, was it life-threatening? And in the first moments we heard it might be, because of course if the heat gets into his lungs, you might burn a lot of soft tissue there, and then you're really screwed.
Yeah. How did you keep the team together?
Well, in our sport, everybody realizes that our sport is a team sport. Although you race a lot of individual distances, you have to prepare as a team. Our sport is a technical sport. You have to be very efficient in your technique. It's a physical sport. You have to be very fit. Sometimes you race 12, 14, 15 times during a weekend. And it's a tactical sport, your strategies. And especially that part, the tactics, you can only practice with people on the ice. I can be the best athlete out there if I don't have somebody to spar with, I don't have somebody to put my tactical skills on, and getting blocked sometimes and having an interaction on the ice. There's no way you will ever make it into the top of our sport. And that is our biggest thing, that with our top athletes, that we challenge each other every single day on that ice. And then suddenly missing a guy like a Shinky Knecht is a major thing, because he was always, of course, he's like an alpha wolf. You know, he's there, he's king of the mountain, and every practice, every lap, you know, he's present with his voice, with his techniques, with his tricks. He's a magician on the ice, and everybody realizes that, and everybody benefits from those tricks, and everybody benefits from his speed. And suddenly you're missing him. That was one thing, but we had like 3-4 weeks due to his leg injury. We could sort of kind of practice that a little bit. You know, we had other guys filling those spots. Not great, but 2-3 guys were filling it up, and then later on in the season, you know, that people grow from it. But the first 2-3 weeks prior to the Europeans was a very hard thing. And then suddenly it's not like you're missing a guy on training. You might miss a guy for the rest of your life, and that was very hard. And I think the first few hours we let the people just, you know, let your emotions go. You know, it's like don't don't put pressure on it to keep focusing on your competition. No, there's more things in life than competitions, you know. And I think we told them around 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday. We raced the next morning, and then later on in the evening around 8 o'clock we sat again with the team, and everybody had their feelings. They talked to each other. They had their telephone, you know, talking to people that they felt like it was necessary to inform the people. And then we actually picked it up at 8 o'clock at night, and okay guys, what would Shinky want us to do, you know? And I think that really helped the team. Like, maybe the thing that really counts here is perform. How can we show that we are a team is by performing well and getting the best out of us, and focusing the people. What have been our red line through the year? You know, what have been the core that this team floats on, and that's team building. That is getting strength from each other. That is, if you don't feel well today, somebody else will put a shoulder on you. You know, it's like shoulder to shoulder, focus on the same point, and helping each other where needed. And maybe emphasizing that even more that evening prior to our competition made him feel strong, and they wanted to perform for him, and that helped really.
What was your best moment?
Ooh, well, I can't.
Can be as an athlete or as a coach, or both.
Best moment I'm probably very privileged that I can look back on a lot of good moments. Especially since I'm back as a coach in the Netherlands since 2010, I got a feeling that all those years that my federation and my teammates from the 80s made the sport as it was in those 80s to something great, and then it really fell down. We didn't pick it up in the Netherlands while the rest of the world started to invest in the sport. That I had an opportunity to come back in 2010 and help the people at that time with the knowledge I built up in those years, with the experience I picked up in those years, with my work experience, and with my drive to really think positive and challenge athletes to think bigger than normally the world around them thinks what is possible. Don't be limited to what people around you think is possible, you know. Be a free thinker. And I had that opportunity in 2010, and I think that was for me a very great moment to get the opportunity, grab the opportunity, and create a team. And then, of course, in the years afterwards, winning, 8 months after I started to train on our home rink in Heerenveen, winning the European Championships in the ladies relay and the men's relay, and a few years later in Sochi winning the first ever medal for the Olympic Games by Shinky. A year later, Shinky won the World Championships overall, and on, and Jeroen Otter switching between long track and short track and winning 2 gold medals at the games in Sochi, and winning a 4th, a 5th, and a 6th place on their individual short track events, being, in my opinion, the most complete athlete at that time. In Sochi, winning 2 medals in 2 disciplines, having Suzanne Schultingen winning a gold medal, but starting the first day with a great performance of Shinky winning a silver medal. At that time, it was the best medal for a short track athlete. 2 days later, Yara van Kerkhoff, he had a tough year, winning a silver medal, and all those performances are amazing. Having a team win a World Championships after in Sochi, we fell in the first half lap. After 30 meters, there was a collision, and the start was not recalled. And for 44.5 lap, we were skating behind the pack, and we missed a chance. That's how I felt, and that's how my team felt. We missed a chance to fight for a medal, and a month later we won the gold medal at the World Championships. And so it's like, you know, when we get knocked down, we stand up again. You know, it's like we learn from our mistakes, we learn from disappointments, and we know it's not the result that counts, it's the process, the trajectory we choose towards our goal. That is a much more important thing and should be valued much heavier than it does normally than just results, especially in sport like, well, you're from track cycling, I'm from short track, it's a pec style sport. And in pec style sports, you control your own game, you don't control the game of the other people. And I really emphasize that we have to focus on ourselves, and we have to focus on the line that we choose in the beginning of the season, of the beginning of a in this case a quadrennium till the next games. Stay to that path, believe in the path, and okay, sometimes you get a disappointment, like we did, and there was a dark moment as a coach as well in 2014 at the games, but a month later we win the World Championships and with the same team. And these are moments that these are really great.
If you could go back in time 10 or 15 years, what advice would you give your younger you? With all the knowledge you have now.
Yeah. That's a question we ask ourselves every day, because we know the sport in 5 years from now, we look back and we think, gee, what kind of a jokers were we, How could we not have seen this? How could we not have approached the sport differently? So, and I that's why you have your evaluations for, It's like, how did this the past season went? How did the past 2 years, 4 years go? And one of the things, in my opinion, is always the creativity, and don't let other people say that things are not possible. Don't let other people say that, and these are federations, these are media, these are guys that are not in your team, these are other team members from different countries that have a different approach, and most of the time it comes because they think in limits, and I think you should not be limited. If I go to another sport and I sit there and I believe I always see opportunities, and of course 9 out of 10 have been probably worked out already in the past by those coaches and sport members and facilitators. But sometimes, because of a different view and helicopter view or a complete different perspective on that sport, opens a complete different way of approaching that sport and gives a lot of opportunity. And that's why I'm very open to having foreigners train with me and having different teams coming over to the Netherlands, because I really believe they learn from me, but I learn from them as well. If I stay within my group and not getting info from outside, from outsiders, from people that are actually not knowledgeable about my sport but about other specialisms, then I will limit myself, and that's one thing. If I look back, make sure that you do not do that. If somebody says it can't be done, that's for me actually a challenge to show that it can be done. I've showed that in the short track sport when I came to the Netherlands in 2010 was very determined of, I think it's called fetishism, that if somebody wears a Korean skin suit or a Canadian skin suit, they're unreachable for us because they're from another planet. And the only thing we can do is look up to them and fight for second or third place. And that's one thing that I told them, that is the biggest mistake you can do. Of course they're great, and they're probably better than you right now, but the moment you have that thought in your mind, you're always one step behind. And I find all kind of creative ways to solve that problem. I took Koreans to the Netherlands, the best in the world, and have them train with us. I had a little bit of a status as a coach that I had an opportunity to do so, and within a few months we're training with the world champion from Korea, for example, or training with the European champion from a different country than the Dutch were. Gee, what is the difference between those guys? They got 2 legs, they got 2 arms, they got a mindset, they know what they want. They work hard, they're determined, And they do not think with limits like we do. They don't think that, oh man, the Dutch are better than us. I noticed that the real first time when I started working prior to the Games of Vancouver, living in Canada, that the long track teams there were looking up to the Dutch as, wow, these are the king of the mountains or the queen of the mountains. And I noticed that there was an extra load on their shoulders that they would really forget about that thought. They could have released them from a load. Well, and every load pulls you down. Yeah? It's like an anchor going forward. If you cut the line, then you don't have the anchor behind you. And that's what I would like to advise to young coaches and athletes that are coming up right now. If you think that a world record cannot be broken, or if you think that a world record is ridiculously fast and it's not, as an 18-year-old, ever in your reach, then you probably are right. Then it will never be in your reach. If you think it is a challenge, you got a chance.
Interesting. John F. Kennedy made a quote like this. He said, "The moment you settle for second place, you'll become second."
That's one of the quotes. That's one of the things that I talk with my young athletes with. It's like, if you have something in your mind and the other guy has something else in his mind, the biggest chance is that you're going to be right and he's going to be right. So you better get the right thing up there instead of going for second or going for third, or being happy that you can go to the games, or being very released of the pressure that you qualified for a major competition. Well, the word trials or the world qualifying competitions are there to qualify, and that's the first step. But it's about that World Championships. It's about those Olympic Games. It's not about participating at the Olympic Games.
And when did you develop that kind of belief, or also trying to instill it in your athletes? Was that abroad, or did you do it as an athlete yourself?
Well, as an athlete, I think I was a good athlete, but I was definitely not the best. I like to train. That's one thing I like doing. I think I never missed a training. I thought I was great, and I had a lot of enjoyment doing it, and I was thinking about it. And in those years, the feet forward, what am I going to do in this practice? I was creative. I played with a lot of equipment in those years. I created my own carbon fiber boots in the 80s while people didn't even know how to spell carbon fiber. It's like that was my core. That's what I loved doing that. And a competition, it was great, but I wasn't. The team made me in those relays. They got the best out of me, and it was not myself. It was my teammates that got the best out of me. But one thing that I remember, even as an athlete, even as a student, I thought that nobody was ever better than I was. If I choose that study, I should be able to finish it as long as I give myself time to do so. And if I talk to people, I'm like, okay, great that you are whatever, but if I would have chosen that path, I probably could have done the same. Life is about making choices, and sometimes you make the right choice. And if I look back now, maybe it was very lucky that we won in '88 a gold medal, and I ended up being in the sport that I love doing. But maybe I would have been a great stockbroker, and that's sort of kind of what I had in mind, being an analyst on the stock market. The greatest thing I think as an athlete or as a coach is be challenged what you do. Always feel that challenge, and if the challenge is not there, then you create one. But never see it as a job. Always see it as an opportunity to get the best out of yourself. And that makes me as a coach sometimes very difficult to work with, because I expect the same for all the athletes that are stepping up.
So what's your coaching philosophy? You touched on that a little bit, but if you outline your philosophy, what would it be?
Yeah, it changes over the years, of course. When I started as a coach, I was more like, this is the way we did it. So guys follow up, and slowly you start to realize that every single person is, of course, a completely different person and needs a different approach. But one thing that everybody should realize, and I just emphasized that already, is challenge yourself. If you do not challenge yourself, if you cannot think bigger than your neighbor can, then probably there's a chance that you top yourself. You know, there's a limit of your abilities, and I believe there is no limit on people. And of course, if you're 165 and your dream is about becoming an NBA player, that's difficult. But besides physical limitations, and we can do so much more than we do. And that's why people keep improving, because the next generation picks up already on a train that is running on a high speed, and they jump up and they move from wagon to wagon until they are close to the front. And I don't think we were less physical capable 10, 20 years ago, but the times that guys skated 10, 15 years ago, the women are skating right now. And are the women as strong as the guys in the past? Of course not. But everybody thinks in limits, and that's where you end up, and then you quit your career, and then the next person is like, okay, maybe I should be able to go over that a little bit. They come into the sport a little earlier these days. The opportunities, the facilities are bigger. I think if you want to have a sustainable performance, like not only depending on one or two good and great athletes, there's a few things you definitely need. Yeah, and that's the philosophy I try to have, is make sure that facilities are available. If you want to be a speed skater, you should have a lot of ice rinks available to the sport. It should be a safe environment. You know, like the people that are training hard, they should feel safe in the facility that they do so. You should be a little lucky that there is some technical people around you, and that's I think a responsibility for the federations to invest in trainers, to invest in coaches, to invest in our sport and a lot of other specialties. But if you invest in that, then you create a pool of people that are capable of getting the best out of an athlete. I think a very important thing is that you get recognition about for your sport and your performances in the society you work in and you live in, and that means that your parents should support you and your family members. And most of the time that's not the most difficult thing, but as a 15, 16-year-old and you're at high school and you said, I'm a short track speed skater, people should say, wow, that's great. You know, that makes you feel great. If you say, I am a curling guy, probably right now people might still think, what kind of a sport is that? While if you would say that in Canada, wow, gee, man, curling is great. I grew up in a part of Amsterdam that it was tennis, cricket, or hockey, and then not the field hockey. And you didn't play soccer in my school. Nobody played soccer, and hardly anybody skated. I was an exception in there. And so if you were a hockey player, it was great. You know, you played for Amsterdam Hockey Club. Or you tennised on a certain level. Or you played cricket. And I think what we try to do as a federation is that people accept the sport you do, and that they think it's a great choice. And media attention is a very important part. And these are all things that we try to build in the last 8-9 years, since 2010. What does the media need from us? And that's that whole. In the Netherlands, is a palette of colors. You know, like the different approaches for the different things that I just mentioned. If you work on all of them, I know that as an athlete, you have almost a path towards the goal that you set for yourself. And that's one of my philosophies as a coach, that I'm more than just train somebody. I feel responsible for a lot of things, a lot of items around it. And that's where I work with my team very hard on to realize that.
Interesting. You mentioned about not thinking in limits. I think in the last years, Carol Dweck has coined that fixed mindset versus growth mindset, right? So you think in limits or not. If you have an athlete that thinks a lot in limits, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, first of all, is to make him realize, and you can draw that. You know, it's like. Because many times you can have a lot of discussions on an office table, sitting like we're sitting and discussing all kind of things. But I'm more like a practical guy. You go onto the ice, and okay, what's the limit? And the guy goes like, well, you know, I want to have, I dream to skate under 9 seconds per lap, you know, or I dream about going through the speed limit, like they thought in the 50s with their power jet planes, or I think about jumping higher than 2 meters. And most of it in the beginning, I leave it what it is, and then they finally cross that line. They go faster than 9.0, and the next week later they do it again. And if they do it one more time, it's no fun anymore. It's like, it's only 8.9. I said, exactly, that's where you go wrong. Because the first time you went through it, you were a happy guy, and within like a week, you're not satisfied anymore. Yeah? And if you go very broad, if you don't only think about your lap time, but if you think about the approach you work, about the weight training you do, and about all the other things we do, if those limits are already no more, don't give you the satisfaction after 1 week, you know, why don't we think much bigger? So you can be, you know, being challenged for a longer time. Because there is no fun skating 9.0. You know, I've given the examples, and most of the time, after this happens, I go to a world record list, and I show them, you know, in 1981, the men's record was this, and look what happened. For this guy, breaking a world record was the greatest thing on earth. And right now, probably your 3-year younger brother probably skates this already or laughs about it because it's definitely not fast, and he definitely sees like the girls are even skating this. So if you think in numbers like most athletes do, you limit yourself, and it doesn't even get close to your potential. And I always like to give practical examples instead of talking about it. Let them experience it. Let them win a race. Well, how great was this? There were only West European athletes, or there were only Dutch athletes, or there were only athletes that are A juniors, or you know, approach it from. But there's so many more other people out there. You know, if you let something go, or if you don't focus on this point, I guarantee you somewhere in the world, on the other side, a Chinese 60-year-old is definitely doing it, what you're not doing. And you might be happy about that little performance you just did. It's not going to help you in the long run. And of course, we learn a lot about having little steps and having goals, you know, close by, so you have a great feeling every day. But that should not stand in the way of thinking really big. And I think sometimes we, in general, and especially the first group around the athlete, the parents, they're always satisfied if a kid does well. And we approach the world as everything should be positive. You know, an athlete should feel positive. We should have a lot of positive feedback to the athlete. And I think in a world that we're not, you know, we grow up, maybe a little sidestep, we grow up in a world that is a win-win situation. We everything we do economically, everything we learn at school is like, if we do something good, it probably is good for somebody else as well. We pay taxes, and you know, and because of the taxes, we got a great infrastructure. It's always good for something. And there's only one thing actually that is still like the medieval times. In the medieval times, if you wanted to grow, if you wanted to become a bigger businessman, or you wanted to become a landlord, the only thing to get more land is grabbing it from your neighbor. He had a little less, I got a little more. And slowly over the years, that we got away from that. And I think it's a good thing to get away from it, but there's only one thing in the world that does not share anything, and that's top sport. If I win, you lose. That's how simple it is. If I stand on the highest podium, you probably are next to me, but a little lower, or you're not even on there. So we don't share anything there. And I think with that approach, the only way to reach that is thinking limitless. and explaining this and having experienced it and making him feel bad sometimes and feeling like a F-U-C-K loser, that's the only way to get to the top. Because somewhere down the line, every athlete is going to run into something he does not like. Every athlete is going to experience a very nasty thing in his sports career. Could be that he gets injured, I don't know, somebody around him dies, he cannot skate for a season because whatever reason, he misses his Olympic Games. Well, everything went well and he got disqualified by a referee. You name it, every athlete, every person reaches a moment that he's like, God damn it, I'm going to quit. This is so terrible. Why did I work so hard for the last few years, and why does it happen to me and not somebody else? And the athlete that actually is capable of thinking about it, looking for creations to actually forget and only learn from that he was knocked down and he can stand up by himself and he doesn't need a lot of people to do so. He feels like it is. The people around him are helping him, but he creates a world that he can resurrect from that the disappointment, that injury, or that whatever, that makes him strong, and that really makes him the athlete he can be. And if you hang into, when I was so unlucky, I had an injury, and why is it me, and keep in that negative thought, you need negative thoughts to become positive again. You need sometimes to realize that it's not always a party time you're in. You need to realize that top sport is not all about winning. There's no way that happens. None of the athletes, not a Ronaldo, not a Messi, not Sir Hoy, like in your sport. There's always somewhere that it's very negative, that the days are very dark, and that you hardly see the light in the tunnel. And if you are capable of standing up, your limits are endless. And then actually it's limitless, and it's only light that you see, and that's where you focus on. And athletes have to go through periods like that to realize that if you work hard and if you approach it differently than you did in the past, it's gonna give you some results.
What are your core values as a coach?
Well, sometimes I say as a joke, there's a few things in life that are very important, and we all want to have that 100% of performance. We want to get 100% of our potential. And what is 100%? How do you get the best out of an athlete? And that's sort of kind of if you see that in a cryptography, I think it's called, like in the secret way of reading it. If an A is a 1 and a B is a 2 and a C is a 3, how do you end up with 100? How do you get that? And if you put workout, if you calculate that, the W, O, R, and so on, if you calculate all those letters together, you end up with 98. And you're still short of that 100. So everybody works hard. So you're not going to make a difference by working hard. So what do we do as a team? We get a lot of knowledge. We go to universities and we ask them to help us. We're getting specialists with a team, and we call that knowledge. And if we do the same for the K and the N and the O and the W and so on, we end up actually calculating all of them cumulative. It's going to be 96. So we're very close to 100, but it's still not there. And there's one thing, and I really believe it's all about attitude. And attitude, if you put the A for 1 and so on, you end up with exactly 100 points. You exactly 100%. And that 100%, that attitude makes the difference. Everybody works hard. If I get to that line, on the starting line, and I look left and right, there's nobody on that final at the Olympic Games that did not work hard for 4 years or 8 years. Yeah, none of those country members did not have a team behind them that had a lot of knowledge. But who is capable for 8 years on a row, anonymously go to the ice rink at 8 in the morning, does his laps, go back home, concentrate on what he has done and what he's going to do in the afternoon, and he shows again to the rink at 3 o'clock and goes home at 6. And that's 5 or 6 days a week. What is it? 26 days a month, 350 days a year, always for that one glorious moment at the Olympic Games. You cannot train 1,300 days if you do not have the attitude what you need. You know? And I believe if you really think about what is the core of training, do you have the attitude to do that anonymously, without the media there, without anybody supporting you all the freaking time outside of your own teammates, you know, you're not going to get there. And I think that what lacks, and that's what's standing out on a lot of the athletes. They know how to work with things that are negative and things that are happening to them and they have to overcome, because that's an attitude thing. Working hard when other people maybe think that other things in life are important as well. Yeah, and that's attitude, and that's the core business of what I do, creating that attitude.
What person has impacted you most or influenced you most, and why?
Ooh. Well, you know, in life you always run into people, and sometimes I don't even remember the name of the person, but they told me one thing and it realized me, you know, like a eureka moment, you know, like, how could I not thought about that? It's so obvious, it's around me for years and I didn't see it. And one of the things is like my dad always told me, finish your VWO, like your high school, because then the world is open for you. Then you can do whatever you want. And I had a coach, and he was also a teacher at the university that said, like, you know, how can you be satisfied with a 6, although you pass, while the sport you do, and it was like in physiology, you should always work for a 10 because that benefits you in your sport. You might be more critical on the things you do. And I had people tell me, like, you know, you can work so hard, and you can have the greatest attitude, and you can overcome anything you did. But look from a helicopter view, what are you doing? If equipment is part of your sport, don't rely on people that make the equipment that you don't even know. Or in the beginning of my career as an athlete, they didn't even make really specific equipment for our sport. It slowly got available, but if you think you know better, go for it. And if you do not better, go to people that you think can help you. You know, like, being busy with top sport is more than running around a track or sitting on a bike and go from A to B, or, you know, go in a swimming pool or on a tennis court. It's more than that. It's the other hours around that sport that make a difference. And I had, over the years, I had people telling me that. I had an American friend, Jack Mortel, who he was the team leader. I was the coach in those years that I was in the U.S. And we thought we got so much out of regulations, just like, how is the sport built up in the law book? You know, how does the referee and how do the people of the international federations approach the sport? And that made me very keen on rules. And that made me also keen on that you first have to change a rule if you want to have an impact later on in your sport. Or you have to change the people that are actually turning the knobs. Is like, if I want them to turn a knob, I have to give them an example on how it could be different. And so I always surrounded myself with people that were very critical to what I was doing, and I listened, and then I took what I thought was necessary. And sometimes they told me that is necessary, Otter. You don't pay attention. You know, I'm older, I'm wiser, I have more experience, whatever. Or I don't have any clue what happens in your sport, but in the other sport that I worked with, we always approach the same problem, different way. Maybe you should try. And I always kept my eyes open for that.
Yeah. How do you manage a team? You're with a group of athletes, how do you manage that team?
Managing a team, it's not only the athletes. I work with 6 women, 7 men from the Netherlands, and I have about 4 foreigners that train with us. Besides that, we have full-time or part-time or very little part-time. We have about 10 people, staff members, all with their own specialties. And the most important thing in managing a team is making sure that we all have the same goal. They all feel responsible for what they are doing and what adds their specialty, what the hours they put into the sport. How do they see that it turns into a result or to disappointment?
Yeah.
Like we have an expression in the Netherlands, how do I translate it? We always think that if you work in a team, that you get a better result. If we work together, then we should not be 1 and 1, and that's 2. No, it should be 1 and 1. That should be 3 actually. Yeah. And the question you should ask yourself is that true? And until how big is that team that it's still true? That if you calculate the knowledge of 3-4 people together, does it add up more than the individuals? Because that's of course what you want to do. And teamwork, it's a verb. It's to work. That means you have to really work. That the team realizes that they can benefit from each other. And sometimes I believe that people think, because we go on a training camp and we're gonna go as a team somewhere, that we all start to understand each other better and therefore we perform better. But maybe by being together for a longer time, we're starting to irritate and we're starting to see some characteristics that you don't like from another person. And then actually you get the negative from being on the road, and then you actually see that teamwork adds up on a -1 or a -2. And that's one thing that I really emphasize in training, that if we do something, we do it together. And it's well, you just put a quote from Kennedy, but Kennedy asked himself, or asked the folks in the US, it's like, don't ask yourself what the country can do for you, but ask yourself what you can do for your country. I think Magic Johnson, in an interview when he was great at the LA Lakers, he said the same thing, it's like, I never ask myself what the teammates can do for me. I always ask myself, how can I be of such a value that I can work for my teammates, knowing that what I will get back will make me even a better athlete. And that's how I approach my athletes. And it's very simple. Again, I can talk about it or I can show it at practice. One of our things is a very important part of our practice is the relay skating. Number 1 pushes number 2, 2 pushes number 3, 3 number 4, and 4 number 1 again. Imagine if we do this and number 2 or number 3 are sick today. You can't do the workout. And a young guy that comes into this sport and came from a background that, or they didn't have the numbers to work that way, or their coach was approaching more on an individual way, and sometimes I see that with the foreigners that come to us. Suddenly one day, after a few weeks of practice, I take 1 or 2 of the guys out just on purpose, and they're like, hey, what's happening? Who do I skate with right now? Who's giving me the push? Who do I challenge in my blocking? Who do I challenge in my attacks? Who is actually challenging me? And suddenly it's so clear that if somebody doesn't return a ball from the other side to Nadal in tennis, Nadal is like, okay, should I play against the wall? It's like you need that feedback, you need that sparring from the people around you. And that's always in practical examples, on a hard way. You know, it's not going to be great today, but you feel the difference if you have teammates or not. For example, if in cycling, if you bike in front with all the air resistance you're having, or you're 10th in a group, it's a major difference. Yeah, on the power output, you probably see maybe even a 20% drop if you're in the back. And now suddenly that whole program that was written for this week, you don't do with a team, you do by yourself. Wow. Then suddenly what might have been extensive becomes intensive. And then you realize, gee, if I want to have this pedal RPMs, I want to have this speed, I can't do it by myself. I need other people.
And then if we think about managing a team, but within that team, especially in your sport, in many sports, they compete as an individual. So they train as a team, but they compete as an individual. How do you manage the expectations of the individual for himself and the team expectations?
Well, the management, yeah, I went off a little bit of the subject. Managing this team, I think if you work as a team, we can look and we go back and we say, hey, we had some great results or we did not. But if you monitor everything what somebody does, if I monitor every lap from my athletes in a race, I know exactly what he did and what he did not do and what he should have done and what he did. And what he maybe even did more than we expected him to do. So we can put it clearly on paper. This is what your part of the performance was. And it's the same for the team members as of the staff members. Like, what did the strength and conditioning coach do? Do we see an improvement in the strength of my athletes? And why do I see it, or why do I miss something? So why do we see with this athlete and that athlete? Our doctors, why do we see more people ill this year? Is it because of the choice of what we made in training camps? Were we unlucky with the weather conditions and we made the wrong decisions? Or was the doctor lacking some attention to what he should have done? Why can we not be preventive in a few things? And how fast did we recover from injuries? Equipment. Why don't we have a modification to the blades? While in the beginning of the season we all sat with our technical group and said, okay, we want to have some modifications to the equipment that's available, and somehow we did not. Why? Is it a lack of time? Is it a lack of money? Or is it a lack of attitude? Or did we, it's like, it looks like we're doing fine right now, why go to the next step? And if I can pinpoint every single little mistake or the thing they did well, and more you monitor, the more you can show later on in an evaluation at the end of the season or the end of a 4-year period, this is what we did great, this is where we lacked, this is where we should improve. And why 4 years later we look back and how could we have missed this? Do we need another specialist telling us what to do? Or should our specialists be a little bit more open-minded and go abroad and see what happens in other sports or in other countries? And that's how I manage my team, to show them on a regular basis that everybody has a part of the success of the athletes. If I stand next to the boards and the athlete wins and he gives me a high five, I feel great, and at the same time, I want my nutritionist at home, or my doctor who stands in another corner, or the physiotherapist who did her work the day before, or the strength and conditioning coach who probably looks at the TV, and he should be as proud of that performance as I give that high five. That high five should be for all of them. And the moment they feel that, I know I did a good job as a manager. The moment somebody's lacking that feel, or actually thinks that his performance, his additional work towards that team is minimum and actually did not change the performance, I did something wrong and I should talk to that person.
Okay. And then if we're talking about the support staff, how do you choose the support staff?
Well, we choose sometimes and we choose wrong and then we change to somebody else. But one of the things that I always hear in the first interview, if we talk during the week, at least I want to have a few times that you come back and tell me that I should have done something differently, or challenge me why I do the things I do. So I have to explain, and it becomes not an automatic thing. That's one thing. So I want the specialists to be critical on what I do from their point of view of their specialism, and at the same time they should be open for criticism from the other staff members on their specialty, on their field of play. A doctor should be, pointed out that why did you miss this? Why is somebody sick? Why are we lacking something? And if you cannot handle pressure, if you cannot handle criticism, top sport, it might not be the field that you should operate in. And if you're open to that, and if you have the attitude to be able to work 24/7, of course reasonable, but 24/7, then you might be a very successful member of our team. And if not, or after a year or two, we notice that people are not capable of handling the criticism, or that they always say, we're doing great, then it's time to depart.
That's an interesting one. And then how do you create the atmosphere that criticism can be taken constructively rather than as an offense?
Well, but that's exactly criticism. Actually, if you go back to the Greek, criticism was just that you ask a question. It's just you ask a question about something you might not be 100% sure of what this meant, or not 100% sure, but will come up to the result that we're talking about. But slowly, criticism in the Dutch language right now actually is picked up as a negative thing. As I got critics on your behavior, or critics on your way of work, or critics on your knowledge. But critics is just meant, at least in my team, to make sure that we keep on our toes, that we should feel we should feel happy that people show interest in what the work you do. And critics, for us, it's written in not in red that attracts a bull. Critics is written in a great color of, wow, people do care what I do, and maybe I should think about it one more time, or maybe I should show them my way of work. This is the base why I do it for. This is my experience I had in other teams. And that's, of course, what we try to explain to our staff members, and also to our athletes as well. Critics, and it's a hard thing because people do not always feel it that way, but it's explained to them over the years, this is how we work, and do not take it personally in a way of, we try to undermine your knowledge. We try to ask why you do the things you do, and what do you think will be benefiting the athletes in the near future. It's really an open book. We don't have little agendas, or we don't have small groups in our staff members. We are very transparent, and I want people to criticize me as well. So I go back home and I'm like, okay, did I really not see this? Did I really made a mistake? Or should I go back and what I did automatically in the last few weeks, months, or years is out of date, and I should come up with a new idea.
Has being an athlete helped you with your coaching?
Of course, in my opinion, it does, but it doesn't mean that I've seen coaches that were definitely less successful athletes are still great coaches. But one thing, although the sport really evolved, what helped me is the world of short track speed skating feels really like a huge world, a family that I know. I know every little thing that happens. I have a sixth sense for changes that are made in this sport by people on the international level, like the people in the council, the people in technical committees that come up with new ruling, new ways to approach the sport, to athletes that are stepping in, like I was as a 16, 17, 18-year-old. I got a sixth sense on what the equipment is doing for us and what the industry is doing for us. Industry in blades, boots, but also in skin suits, in safety systems, in the way the ice is made on an ice rink. So if you have an experience of 40 years in this sport, it definitely helps over somebody with a lot of physiological knowledge coming from the outside, but they can be definitely a specialty in our sport by having a lot of knowledge on one part that is part of our sport. But that's what I'm trying to do with my specialists. And in the past, although I can't say that to a lot of people anymore, I can tell, hey guys, I have won a lot of medals. Sometimes maybe trust me a little bit on where we're going. I kind of guarantee it, but it's more than just a lucky shot where we're trying to do. Not like we're just throwing 100 people against the wall and whoever sticks will be our champion. We don't have those amounts, so we try to do that with a certain philosophy, with a lot of people around us that all monitor the performance you're doing, it helps if you come up with a curriculum in the past, that showed that we did the right thing, that we didn't miss a lot.
Credibility, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What's your view on motivation versus discipline? A very open question, I know, but I'm curious.
Well, discipline most of the time is laid up by the people outside. Yeah, so the coach tells somebody to do something, or the parents tell them to do something. Well, motivation to me is a creative thing. It comes from the inside, and people see more than like my athlete sees a different world than I see. My athlete sees bigger things or colorful things, while I maybe focus on one or two particular things, and that the world he sees motivates him to do the things he does, and that needs the discipline or the attitude to get him to the highest level.
How does a typical day in the life of a coach look like?
Well, it definitely has the national team coach I am. What I just described for the athletes, they show up at 8 or 8:30 in the morning. Yeah, they start warming up. They change in the clothes that we need on the ice. Then we skate for 2 hours. Then we do a small cool down. Then they go home around 11:30, 12 o'clock. And then in the afternoon we do the same thing, and we do that Monday through Friday and then Saturday morning. And that's what we do all the weeks of the year. And then in the weekends we race Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We do that in Heerenveen, or we do that abroad. And the Olympic year we are about 150 days on the road. So me as a coach, I'm there when they show up, and when they go home, I go in my office and look over the work and monitor the things that they did. I go over the lap times, go over the plan, go over the expectations we had that did not match my view of that practice, and hopefully we can turn a little bit and create a better training the afternoon or the next day. And that really goes till 6 o'clock, and then I'm home, and then I probably have to go through some emails. So I'm 24/7 with my sport, and I notice when I'm relaxed, I'm very creative. I have ideas every single day. If it's equipment, if it's a way we should practice, if it's the way that I should talk to my staff members, if it's a way of challenging my athletes, and if it's, I see sports. Yeah, I love to watch little clips around the end of the year that I see a lot of athletes doing great performance, or the bloopers, and I'm trying to learn from the way they approach their sport. How can it be that somebody can win every single World Cup, like for example in your sport with the team sprint last year? There's so many things that could go wrong, but somehow, you know, it did not happen. Sven Kramer winning 10 European championships. How can that be? How can a Cristiano Ronaldo leave Real Madrid, and in those 8 years he was there, or 10 years he was there, they performed always great. He leaves, and suddenly the core of that apple is gone, and he's in Juventus, and Juventus makes the next, quarterfinals. And he scored three goals. How is it that people can always perform when they need to, and why is it that other people cannot? And that, for me, that's the greatest challenge in life. How can I get to the potential every single time, not only for the athletes, but for myself as well?
That's interesting. And you said you have many ideas coming up, right? Do you pursue every idea, or you have a... When do you know that's an idea worth chasing?
I definitely do not pursue every idea, but even that, what remains is still a lot. and out of all those ideas, 90% dies somewhere on the drawing table, or finally we work it out and it did not give us the change that we were looking for, or we could not make it because we are not knowledgeable enough, or we don't have the budget to do so. But once or two really get to the surface, and we get, for example, a safer skin suit. Yeah, imagine if the racing car of Max Verstappen is not as safe as it is right now, but he has the speed in the 70s, he probably will think twice before he passes somebody else. Yeah. Well, we try to take that away from our athletes. We have a safety system. If they crash, they stand up, they shake their head, and they continue to practice. With the same speed 10 years ago, people would be out for weeks before they get back onto the ice. Well, these different approaches, by creating a safer ice rink, by creating a safer falling system, better ice quality, a skin suit, what normally was like a Speedo, like a condom almost, putting Kevlar in there, like that, this cut-resistant material, that you never feel limited on the challenge you can take in practice over in racing. Well, that's one example that we worked on. There's a lot that we worked out, but a multiple that we did not work out or did not work.
Okay. Do you want to nominate someone to be interviewed?
Jeffrey Herlings. I think what he did by winning almost every World Cup in motocross, that is, you rely on your equipment. You know, we hardly see that sport on TV, but we all see the Formula One, and people drop out there all the time. How is it possible that his team is that great that he can win every single race on a surface? Well, we all know it had bumps, it has sand, it has, you know, it's like, have you ever been on a motocross thing? Of course, maybe with BMX, that is a little close to it. How's it possible that guy can just win every single race and be world champion far before the last race of the year? And well, I think that is the guy should be much more in the spotlight than he was last year.
Interesting. Where can people find you?
Next to the rink.
Next to the rink. Okay. Yeah. Online presences?
Well, I Twitter sometimes. That's all I do.